The following program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
How can you leave when you won an election? Trump's insistence that he would not leave the White House has never been previously reported and shines a new light on the chaotic final days of his administration. Haberman writes of a shift in Trump's private comments on the election loss. In the immediate aftermath of the 2020 presidential election, Trump seemed to recognize the loss. He comforted one advisor saying, "We did our best," and told junior press aides, "I thought we had it," seemingly almost embarrassed by the outcome.
A new book details Trump's attempts to continue residing in office, as well as peddling the big lie to make his case. According to the book, he told aides his plan to stay, as well as reaching out to others in desperation to achieve his number one priority, which is staying in power. This comes as no shock to those of us who have been paying attention, but rather another piece of the semi-fascist puzzle that Trump and the MAGA Republicans are attempting to fabricate. It does, however, fall onto fortuitous timing, as the January 6th Select Committee is set to meet again later in the month.
If the Electoral College does elect President-elect Joe Biden, are you not going to leave this building?
Just so you, certainly I will. Certainly I will. And you know that. But I think that there will be a lot of things happening between now and the 20th of January. A lot of things.
But at some point, Trump's mood shifted, and he was heard saying he would not leave. He was even overheard asking Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel, "Why should I leave if they stole it from me?"
Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country. It was a rigged election. You look at the different states, the election was totally rigged.
Stories like this will most likely continue to unearth as the committee prepares some of its final addresses to the country. More and more of the MAGA squad have jumped ship and given crucial evidence over to the committee in attempts to save their own skins while building the public case against Donald Trump. To those who cannot see that where there is smoke, there is most certainly fire, I ask you this: why would Donald Trump tell his aides and other cohorts that he intended to stay if he did not mean it? If he did really win the election, then why were his claims not backed up in court? Why would Republicans across the country encourage election interference and intimidation? His efforts were not a part of creating a better America or fighting for the unheard, but rather a simple egotistical tantrum to get his way. He takes his ball, and rather than go home, he tries to stay in the White House. His infantile ways were on full display, and not much has changed since then. A key takeaway here is this: when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Trump's allies knew of his lawlessness ahead of the 2016 election and continued to encourage and enable that behavior throughout his administration and into the 2020 election. If they regain power, they will most certainly continue to do his bidding and dismantle our electoral process and ultimately our way of life. But if we stand firm in the facts and the truth, we can and will defeat these treasonous threats to our democracy, and that's a fact. Sappers, clear the way.
Are you ready?
Hey everybody, it's Jeff. I hope everybody's doing well today. It's really nice here today. Nice breeze. I guess it was like 81 degrees and it wasn't humid. Beautiful day. Beautiful day today. So it was a nice way to top a Wednesday. Okay, but today was also a horrific day in Russia because Vladimir Putin's motorcade got hit with a bomb. in another assassination attempt over, of course, the Ukraine invasion. And this came from Kremlin insiders. It says his car was hit by a loud bang on its left front wheel, which was followed by heavy smoke. And Putin's limo was driven to safety with the president unharmed, but there have been multiple arrests from his security service, so it's claimed. Some of his bodyguards have vanished amid claims that secret information about the 69-year-old's movements were compromised. The anti-Kremlin channel claims Putin was traveling back to his official residence in a decoy motorcade amid security fears. Yeah, right. Let me tell you something. Except for the Trumplicans, the Russians are masters of propaganda, okay? They can tell the lie with the best of them. The backup convoy is made up of 5 armored cars with Putin in the third, so it's claimed. It's unclear when the potential assassination attempt took place and has not been immediately possible to verify the claim. On the way to the residence, a few kilometers away, the first escort car was blocked by an ambulance, and the second car drove around without stopping due to the sudden obstacle and during the detour of the obstacle. In Putin's car, a loud bang sounded from the left front wheel, followed by heavy smoke. The SVR, which is the Russian equivalent of the KGB, the SVR general alleged Putin's car, despite the problems with control, made its way out of the attack scene to reach the safety of the residents. The body of the man who was found driving the ambulance, which blocked the first car from the motorcade, was found. It doesn't say if they've identified him or nothing, but apparently he's dead. But right now, I mean, Russia is taking some heavy setbacks in Ukraine. And you remember the last video, I said there was a whole bunch of people calling for him to resign. So this happening the next day shouldn't be of any surprise to anyone. People are really pissed. And, the losses will continue to mount. And the closer we get to winter or into winter over there, the worse things are going to get. Because, like I said, a lot of the Russians are out of work when all those American and Western companies left, okay? Some 40,000 jobs were just taken away. And there's been a huge amount of Russians leaving the country, fleeing to other neighboring countries. And so, I mean, right now the government and the society is in economic upheaval. So that's not good. And at the same time, you got Putin threatening to shut off all gas and oil to Europe, okay, basically. And Europe is like, saying, go ahead, we can stick it out. On top of that, I mean, there's rumors that you got China and perhaps North Korea helping out Russia, and Turkey, I believe, was the other country, and Turkey was helping them out in some way. So there are some countries possibly trying to prop up Russia here in a way. There's certain things that are being imported into Russia from other countries, like cars and stuff like that, who are not obeying the sanctions simply because they either they're not part of NATO or whatever, or what have you. But it's certainly not the same level of importation that they were getting before, which means they've taken a huge hit in their national budget. And I think I quoted it was almost 50% they've lost since the sanctions happened. So that's a big hit. Okay, That's a lot. It's gonna factor into a lot of different things, including the military. I mean, they can't possibly keep funding this mistake of a war in Ukraine with half their national budget already taken away. I mean, what are they going to do? Take the rest of it and just? I mean, they've done it before. You know, USSR, the Soviet Union, during the Cold War, dumped every asset they had into the military, which left a lot of people, you know, stranded basically on their own in their own country. Okay, no help at all. Fend for yourself. And you know, that's how they did things back in the 80s, because they just invested everything they could put their hands on into building up their military. And you know, right now, with this thing going on in Ukraine, Putin would like nothing more than to invest in the military, and you know, whatever he's got left for money is going to go into that. Okay, and I don't think people in the Politburo are going to settle for that, especially when they figure out what they've lost already in the since February, all the shit that's been taken away from them, and the unrest that's going on in the population. You know, it's really getting bad out there for them. So, but Ukraine is picking up some gains, regaining territories that the Russians were holding on to, and Russians are retreating, from what I understand, in all the areas. So it's a good situation right now for Ukraine. I just fear that you know, at some point Putin may feel like, you know, if we can't take that country with conventional weapons, we're going to use the arsenal we have in, you know, tactical nukes or whatever like that to take it out. But like I said, is he willing to destroy the very thing he wants to gain? Because you know, and I know, that if you, even a tactical nuke, the radiation in the area won't go away in his lifetime or his grandkids' lifetime, or you know. And when would it ever be nice to habitable to go back in there and you know what I'm saying? He basically would be gaining an irradiated country into Russia, which would make Russia their responsibility. Okay, they'd have to be responsible for its cleanup, rebuilding of its cities. You know, can they really do that? No, not with what they got. I don't see Russia ever being allied with any country in the world now for a long, long time. I really don't. I don't see that happening now. Even if they got rid of Putin now in some assassination attempt, the rest of the world is like, you know, they've had it up to here with Russia. Okay, they thought they could do business with that country because things looked on the surface like it was going well. And then this shit happens in Ukraine, and sanctions happen, and a lot of companies lost a lot of money due to those sanctions. Okay, a lot of them did. And so they're not going to go and do this shit again. You know, go get back into bed with Russia. So, you know, Russia's future, at least for the next generation or two, is really going to be, you know, pretty grim. And I don't see that they're ever going to have anybody elected into you know, their presidency over there that's really going to be able to change what's been done. I mean, they're going to be cleaning up Putin's mess for decades. Okay, you see how it is? It just took 7-8 months to create this mess, and it's going to take decades to undo it. You see, it's a lot easier to destroy than it is to create. And so, you know, that's why I say Russia's future is pretty well shot to hell right now for what they did. Nobody's going to feel safe about doing business with them because, hey, you got a business to run, and all of a sudden something happens and you lose all your money. Hey, stockholders ain't going to like that. Okay, they don't want to do business with a country that's going to possibly turn their back on them. You know, who can blame them for that? Okay, so the other thing I want to discuss here is something, an argument I heard on radio, radio, on Thom Hartmann's show that he does, and he had a person who called in arguing in favor of what the Supreme Court did for the Roe versus Wade, overturning that. Okay, he had, laid out an argument here that was really kind of shot to pieces by Hartman, because he's a smart guy, But, I wanted to touch on that a bit here. The guy, what he said was that in 1973, when they ruled on Roe versus Wade, the court was forced to rule on that because the country was in a political and social turmoil, okay, and they needed to intervene in order to put a stop to it, basically. And that the right that they gave the women about that was not in the Constitution, okay, and therefore it was an invalid decision that they made. They only made it in order to basically calm the waters, as it were. And from what I understand, in history at that time, I was too young to remember that. Yeah, there was a lot of commotion. There was a lot of things people were arguing and fighting about back in the 70s, early 70s. It was sort of like stuff that kind of bled in from the 60s, that they were still arguing for then. And so there were many things going on at that time. But to think that, it was all just about abortion is a mistake. I mean, you're not thinking about the year or this what was happening at the time. There was a lot of issues going on politically, socially, okay? And if the Supreme Court isn't there to address issues like this, okay, if it's not there for that, which is what the guy was saying, that it's only supposed to be there to basically play within the boundaries of the Constitution, then what the hell did the last 150 years mean? Whenever social and political upheavals began, when the Supreme Court had to be asked on to do something about that, okay? And we can go back here. I got like a little list here of 18 of the most historic civil rights moments of the last 150 years, okay? And of course, ending slavery was one of those things. Ending slavery, which the right to have slavery was not part of the Constitution, okay? But thank God we woke up to the fact that it needed to end. We fought a goddamn war over it. So I mean, talk about when the Supreme Court was needed in order to stop that from happening. But yes, slavery was ended through that. And let's see, what else here we got? It was slavery was abolished 1865, the 13th Amendment. Okay. And for 80 years, slavery was a legalized institution in the United States. Okay, legalized. But Lincoln, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was a step towards ending slavery. And then they ratified the 13th Amendment in December of 1865. In 1868, the 14th Amendment granted former slaves the rights of U.S. citizenship. Okay? Because after they abolished slavery, I guess, the former slaves weren't looked at as being people still. Okay? You're still dealing with the same group of idiots that was enslaving these people, so naturally you have to put it in stone that this ends here. It's not enough to just say that slavery's over. Now all those people you brought over here from Africa, they're gonna have to be citizens now. Okay, they're here to stay. So they didn't like that. Okay, and then they also had to come back later and give them voting rights. Okay, which was in the 15th Amendment, it prohibited racial discrimination in the voting process. So they had to do that too. That was 1870. Okay, so even though they were declared citizens, they still didn't want to give them rights to be an American, right? So they were fighting them on that. You know, it's always surprises me how low a person can get when they don't like somebody, you know. And then you had 1909, the NAACP was founded to protect the civil rights that they had gained. Okay, it got so bad they had to create an organization to fight for them, you know, lawyers and stuff like that, because they couldn't all afford to get lawyers, you know, to do these things. So they had to have a special organization in order to accommodate the cases they knew were coming, because you're still dealing with a bunch of bigoted rednecks, okay, who were going to fight them tooth and nail. And sure enough, I mean, that went on and on and on for decades. All right. So in 1920, they gave women the right to vote. Okay. And I imagine, you know, the people that hated, you know, the slaves at the same time didn't like women voting either. Ain't that something? How your own husband probably, you know, sitting there saying, "Oh, you ain't voting, so shut the hell up. You ain't got nothing to say." But you know, men, and it's always men that are trying to dominate everything. You know, go as far back as you want to go in history, you always see men. You know, Christ. You know, and so it happened here too in the United States. You know, we're just repeating, you know, the things that happened. Then in 1948, President Truman ended racial segregation in the military, which was important, but, you know, even when I was in the military, I could still see elements of bigotry and racism in there, and that was back in the 90s, okay? So what happened in 1948 didn't immediately take effect. You know, just because the president deems it stop segregation, end of story, period. It didn't happen that way. Okay, he said it, he ended the racial segregation, but in private they were still doing it. Okay, and nobody was brave enough really to speak out against it and say, yeah, they're violating what happened here. Okay, so he signed an executive order outlawing the segregation in the military. Okay, and you know, it's weird, because why, of all places, the military, would you want to segregate? You know, I always think about that. I mean, if you're trying to keep people segregated in the military, won't that affect the ability to function as a cohesive unit? You know, if you're in a combat situation when the people they're standing beside fighting, one of them might be black, and you say, "Oh, fuck that!" You can't have it's like a football team. How can a football team function together if there's one or two members on your team you don't like, and you don't want nothing to do with them? How the hell is that team going to play well on the field if there's that kind of resentment going on? Okay, it just doesn't work. It cannot work. Okay, that football team is going to fail every single time, because they can't work as a team, as a unit should on the field, because of bigotry in the group. You can't have that in the military, especially in a wartime situation. And my father, when he was in Vietnam, I mean, there was still racism in the military. He saw it, okay? And, you know, when they had their black units and stuff like that, even though they weren't supposed to do that, they did. And, you know, they fought, you know, with them. It wasn't like so bad, but, you know, they were calling them, you know, the N-word all the time. And, you know, it was bad enough where the black soldiers would hang around with the black soldiers, and the white soldiers would hang around with the white soldiers. You know, they was segregating themselves because of upbringing. You know, a lot of these people were born towards the end of the 40s and into the 50s, and so, you know, they were used to that. So they couldn't help but continue that legacy of racism in the military even then. Okay, let's go to a commercial break.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me!
me.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Ruth McLaughlin, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins. I'm an artist, and this is me.
This is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you. Original.
Once upon a time, in a place called Mzansi, the people loved driving cars everywhere. They used lots and lots of electricity and chopped down many trees for firewood. And then a very strange thing happened. The weather began to change. In some places there were droughts where before there was rain. In other places the rivers flooded. The grown-ups realized they were contributing to the strange weather. They discovered if they used clean energy and less electricity, they could save Mzansi for their children.
What happened then?
How the story unfolds is up to each and every one of us. Switch off, recycle, change. Help save tomorrow.
We need to send a very big message to the federal government that we're not going to take this anymore. We need to fire the federal government.
Interesting idea. Maybe it's a good idea. Of course, 42% of Arizona's budget comes from the federal government, so that would require a 72% increase in state taxes to fill the gap. You got that kind of money? No more Social Security checks. No more Medicare. Luke Air Force Base? Gone. In fact, say goodbye to most of the Air Force, Army, Marine bases all over the state. Arizona students would need to figure something else out because federal student aid would have to go. And sadly, all the national parks, including the Grand Canyon, well, they'd have to close. And we'd also lose all of our air traffic controllers, which sounds fun. But hey, drug traffickers would be happy. There wouldn't be a DEA in the state anymore.
We need to fire the federal government.
Right now, Carrie Lake is just a kook with crazy ideas. But if Arizona elects her for governor, her crazy ideas could crush Arizona's economy, raise our taxes, make our communities less safe, and turn Arizona into a national joke. Does this still sound like a good idea?
Approximately 40 feet. That's all there was.
I'm telling you, if Pence caved, we're gonna drag motherfuckers through the street.
As Pence was being evacuated, rioters started to spread throughout the Capitol.
40 feet between the Vice President and the mob.
Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence! Bring out Pence!
Make no mistake about the fact that the Vice President's life was in danger.
Superman movie is brought to you by Canon, the world's leading camera manufacturer.
Quick, it's happy!
Canavision 8 camcorders.
Hey, I thought you were Superman, huh?
Hey, I am!
If it moves, shoot it with a cannon.
Oj, kolla här. Kolla här.
Det var en lavin eller?
Ja, den är kontrollerad. Det är såna jäkla krafter.
Är det safe?
Ja, de vet vad de gör. Nej, det är lugnt. Harry!
part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it.
It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Okay, I was discussing here some of the things that had to be done in this country because of political, social upheaval that was going on, and it required, our government to step in to rectify these things because they were problems that needed to be addressed. Because what was happening was things in our society were happening that did not fit the principles of which the country was supposed to be founded on. Okay, we had all these high-sounding words when the founding fathers wrote this shit out on paper, right? Okay, they thought beyond themselves, and there was nothing in there that was specifically stated, about abortion not being allowed. Okay, nothing like that was in there. But that doesn't mean that because it wasn't in there then, that later on down the road that issue would have to be addressed at some point. Okay. Because you see how it's splitting the country now, and the whole point of having the amendments and the laws and stuff in this country is to keep these fractures from beginning, because that would bring down the country, our democracy, and that's what the Republicans have been doing all this time, as long as I've been around. Is when it comes time to elections, they throw in these social issues all the time instead of coming up with ideas on how to make the country run better and stuff like that. They attack society. They do that because it divides the country. It makes it easier for them to win when they pit people against each other, and so, like I said, when this guy was on the radio with Thom Hartmann and he was talking to him about that, Hartmann was trying to tell this guy, like, here's a number of times when we had to have a law or an amendment put in place in order to keep the country together, and that's what the Supreme Court is for. Essentially, is to tell us, from the documents from the founders of the country, what's in there and how that applies, to today, and how if it applies to what's going on in this situation. Let's say it's abortion. If abortion is something that involves privacy and violating someone's privacy to make their own decisions with their own body, that's spoken of there. It may not say abortion is legal. It's just saying that a person has the right to do their own damn thing. I mean, it's like the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, if there's a danger to them, they should have the right to make a choice. If they're adults, you can't deny somebody that. I mean, that's taking away a right, not reinforcing one. And like you said, that's the first time in Supreme Court history where a right was actually taken away, instead of protected. And another one of these historical things here is in 1954. You had the Brown versus Board of Education desegregated public schools, because that was going on. They had to, stop that because it's perpetuating the same type of fracture that was going to be created if they couldn't say we're all equal under the law, we're all equal in the government, in society. We have to keep this segregation and this, country together. And the only way we can do that is by stop looking at other people as different. Stop looking at them as lesser than or greater than. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has to start on the same plateau, as it were. when you come to this country. It doesn't matter what your race is or heritage or what the hell, okay? If you're a citizen of the country, then you are an American, okay? You are an American first, okay? You're not white first and then American, or black first and then American, or Asian first. You know what I'm saying? You are an American first, okay? And that means, when you say that, that's equality. We're all equal, okay? What comes after that, you know, is secondary, okay? But because we're American, that's the string that bonds all of us together, okay? But that's not good enough for some people, okay? That to them, that string shouldn't even be there. In their eyes, you know, America should be all white. You know, sound familiar? You know, fucking Nazi Germany there. The what was it? The master race. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying here. I mean, you're just not saying master race, but you're saying all Americans should be white. Okay, that's why they're always after the Latinos, always after the Asians, always after the Muslims, always after the blacks, always after anybody who is not a Christian white person in this country. That's the same goddamn shit that was going on in Germany, okay? The Germans over there were Catholic, all right? They didn't want no differences in there. They wanted them all to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan race, whatever the hell that meant. And then, you know, that's all they wanted in Germany. They didn't like outsiders, period, okay? They didn't like that at all. And one man, you know, Hitler, picked one out of the bunch that he didn't like the most, okay, and basically drew all their ire against them. So, you know, we're always like on the precipice of becoming like that here. If it wasn't for, you know, our system that we have here to try to stop that from getting to this point, because they certainly wouldn't have done like anything like this in Germany during that time by having a desegregated public school system, right? That never would have saw the light of day under Hitler, okay, or before that, because, you know, you can't have a Hitler without the anger being there, ready to give to Hitler when he showed up. You know what I'm saying? There was always an undercurrent in Germany at that time, after World War I, where Jewish people were just, you know, frowned upon, okay? I'm not saying all Germans, but there were a lot. It was there. It was seething underneath, okay? People were bitching about it, okay? And if they had social media back then, they'd have been all over the internet spreading that crap, and it probably would have happened sooner, but like I'm saying, that it was there. Hitler just come in there and opened the damn drapes and said, look, we don't want you here at all. You know, basically that's what he did. That's all he had to do to get people to side with him, okay? He knew he was a homeless person there for a while, and he heard all the racket that people were saying on the streets about Jewish people, and he figured, you know, and I figured he was smart enough to put two and two together to figure out what he needed to talk about to get himself put into power, okay? And he was smart in a deadly way. That's the thing about Hitler. He had brains, but he was using them for all the wrong reasons. Okay, and then remember the boycott, the bus system in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1955. Well, they had to do something about that, you know, and even though the bus issue seemed like a small matter, right, you know, like a local issue or something like that, what people didn't realize at that time was that wasn't just happening in Montgomery, Alabama. That was happening all over the place, okay? And people just weren't aware of that. And I don't think they really were until this story broke about that in the news, about this woman that wouldn't leave the bus. And you know how the blacks are all the way in the back, the whites in the front. And you know, it came time, you know, to say, look, this is a seed. You know, keeping people segregated on a bus may not seem like a big thing, but it's a seed that can flourish into something else. And if you don't crush this seed here and there at that time, who knows what the next thing would be that would have rooted out from that segregated bus crap, okay? Who knows what it would have went to next, okay? So if you don't chop down the limbs, branches, and stuff like that of what's coming out of the ground, okay, then you're not really stopping the problem, okay? And yes, you know, even though it was recognized and they, you know, and it stopped it, you know, in a way. It didn't bring an end to the discrimination that was happening, but it did make it known that the United States was not really going to stand for it. Okay, that this shit had to stop, and so that news, that when that happened back in '55, that was a thing that the country had to see. That, you know, we meant what we said about no segregation. You know, this has got to stop, because segregation is how it starts over again. It begins that way and it continues and it festers, and before you know it, we're right back to slavery. We're right back to, you know, no voting. Okay, it all spirals back. It's like pushing a snowball up the hill. I mean, you've got to keep pushing and pushing, and you can't let it come back down. You're going to lose everything, you know. And that's the way it is. So yes, it was a story that had to be reported, but it was a historic moment that opened eyes to a lot of things that people didn't realize were there. And then in '63, we had the huge march in Washington for civil rights, Martin Luther King, which, you know, there was a lot of people like King that was coming out and speaking their mind and giving us their emotion behind it all, which is something that a lot of people didn't hear then. Okay, you got to remember, you know, TV was new, radio was new, it was around for a while, but you know, information wasn't instantaneous like it is today. So it took a while for people to smarten up over things like that and understand what they mean, what's going on in our country. You know, so I think a lot of people just you know, felt like, you know, if they didn't hear about it, it wasn't happening. You know, they had the Equal Pay Act that was passed in '63 for men and women, so that was important. Okay, this set something there. Another thing that's, you know, the guy was saying the Supreme Court shouldn't be involved in or anything like that, or the government should be involved in. If you didn't correct these things as time goes on, what do you think our country would look like today? You know, I certainly wouldn't want to live in the America that it would have become. You know, in '64, the Civil Rights Act outlawed discrimination on the basis of race or sex. See, they were fighting with this thing for a long time. Discrimination was a big thing going on back then. It was part of everybody's life. I mean, it was normal to see whites only, blacks only, you know, back then, because they grew up with it. To them, they didn't understand, you know, that what they were doing was reinforcing this segregation apparatus here that was happening. In fact, I remember watching an episode of the Waltons here, and during the the 7th or 8th season, I guess that's when World War II was picking up, and they started sending people from Walton's Mountain off to war. Okay, now I mean, I know this is a fictitious thing here, but it's kind of illustrate my point here. And Ike Godse's, in his story, he put up a bulletin, like a board, that showed all the people who from Walton's Mountain who went to serve, okay, and then all the people that went to serve and died, okay, and didn't come back, okay. And at the very bottom, he had colored only, and he had the name of the colored people that went and left and didn't come back, you know. And so he was called out on that, and he didn't even realize that he was behaving as a racist by doing that. He didn't realize that. And so, you know, he was told, you know, take those names and put them where they belong with the rest of the people, and you know, get rid of that, you know, stupid colored thing on there. We're all American here. It's like he didn't even realize it. And it's like, I think a lot of people were like that. It's like it's a fact of life. It's like getting up and taking a breath of air back in those days. That segregation was there. It's meant to be there. It's been there for a long time, you know. Just like in the slave days, it was probably normal to look at black people as less than human. They were calling them animals, and because they couldn't talk, you know, they treated them like horses and stuff like that. You know, people back then were so ignorant. Okay, they didn't even understand what a human being was back then, let alone, understanding, how to be equal to, a man, no matter what his skin color was. And so to them, it was easy to, tear apart, a person that doesn't look like you or has the same skin color and say, well, they're supposed to serve us. That's what they're here for. I guess that's what they think. And that's what they were doing. So, you get that idea passed down generation after generation. It becomes a fact of life for these people down there, which is why they had to fight the war, because to them, what they were doing wasn't wrong. Hey, my father did it. My great-grandfather did it. They don't feel like that they were doing anything wrong. That's why they took up arms to stop it. They just didn't want to take the time to understand how dehumanizing they were being, because in their own friggin' religion, it tells you to treat your fellow man, like a friend, like a neighbor. Okay, you see that the Bible doesn't tell you your fellow man may come in all different colors or something. They just say your fellow man, so they just assume they're talking about white people only. It's like if people have to be so specific, especially this guy here was talking about the court. If the Supreme Court had to be so specific, or the Constitution had to be so specific about what rights people had and didn't have, that goddamn piece of paper would have been like 5,000 pages long to cover every conceivable thing that these founders could. They never would have got that thing finished. So they had to leave things open to interpretation to include other things that might come later down the road. There's no way they could have thought about abortion back then as being something of big societal importance today. What the hell would they, what would they have thought? There wasn't as many people back then. It wasn't an issue that needed to be addressed, okay? But things come up over time that you never would imagine happen. They weren't soothsayers. How the hell could they have predicted all that stuff? And the same thing with the gun issue. How in the hell would these people have known that someday down the road they're going to invent guns that can fire 1,000 rounds in a second? How the hell were they going to know that? How were they supposed to know that was going to happen? Back in those days, all they had was a flintlock thing, that shot one round bullet, and it took 30, like half an hour to load the next one. That was the extent of what they knew about deadly weapons. That and swords, I guess, okay? They never thought that a gun would be so deadly that you could level a half of a damn school down with it, or stuff like that. But today, the Nimrods today are saying, well, they meant for today too. Yeah, really. How can you say that they included today as well? Do you think those founding fathers knew what an AR-15 was back then? Or a bazooka? Do you think these people would have understood, if you came to them while he was writing that and said, hey, can you include the AR-15s and a bazooka? They'd have looked at you like you had 6 heads on. There's no friggin' way that they could have known that. But in their heart, what they was trying to do at the time, what they were talking about at the time, was related mostly to protecting our land from the British. They didn't have a military to speak of, and they needed to have, people willing to defend the country with them. A militia, that's what they called it, a militia. They needed to have a militia, which was supposed to be regulated by the government now. No matter what you say, a militia still had to answer to the government. Not a militia that just runs around in the fucking woods going camping and letting their babies hold on to guns. That's not what they meant by militia. That's just bullshit, cowboys and Indian stuff there. You know what I'm saying? That's just kid shit. What they were talking about was, a militia that's regulated by our government. They have to have a government control, because how can you make these people effective if they don't know where they got to be? The government has to tell them where they got to go to be effective. We need you here. We need you over here. Okay? So if it's not regulated by the government, then the militia is useless. It's just people out in the woods playing cops and robbers or whatever. It's bullshit. So that it's only logical that it would have to be regulated by the government. Okay? Just because it's, they think that, it includes, it means that the civilians can have guns in order to make a militia. Well, no, it still has to be regulated. That means the government is still answerable to that. You can't just let people walk around with guns. you're creating the very situation you set a militia up to defend against. You don't want complete chaos in your country. Jesus. And in 65, the Voting Rights Act outlawed voter suppression based on race. Okay? An important thing there. 72, Title IX, helped level the playing field for women's sports. Now, these are things, civil rights is a big thing in this country. We had to go round and round and round for centuries here with that. It took a long, I remember somebody had said, and I can't remember who the hell it was, that said you can't make a law, to stop people from having emotion or something like that. And I'm thinking, and I think what he was referring to was like trying to tell people you can't be racist, you can't be like that, because that's an emotion. You can't regulate that. And what I'm saying is bullshit. I mean, we've been regulating emotion since the first time we wrote a law down on paper. I mean, we have penalties for people who can't control themselves on that, and it protects society as a result. So yes, we can make laws that are not that are designed to keep people from doing bad things. Okay, murder, robbing people, vandalism. Okay, what do you think? If we didn't have these laws there, people would feel like it's okay to do all this shit. Like it or not, people are still childlike in the reasoning, the things they do. And if you don't believe me, take a look at January the 6th, okay? That's as close to today as you can get. There you go. A bunch of people acting on their emotions decide to take their anger out on the Capitol, feeling justified because the president sit there and told them to go do it, essentially, not in so many words, but like I said, basically gave them the green light. Head for it and do it. Emotions. So yes, there's laws to prevent that sort of thing, and that's why they're being investigated, why some of them are in jail now. And that's how you maintain law and order in a civilized society. What country in the world doesn't do something like that? Okay, there has to be laws in any form of government to keep your civilians in line, to keep your country together, to keep it from falling apart. Okay, so don't tell me that you can't regulate people's feelings. Yes, you can, and we're taught that from birth. Our parents are the first people who teach us to regulate our emotions. When we do something stupid, they tell us you shouldn't have done that. We go to school, our teachers are next to teach us that. When we throwing spitballs in class, or screaming our heads off, and talking, writing notes and shit, again, regulation. They have to learn how to be productive and civilized people. Fortunately, a lot of people don't pick that up. Well, it goes on. And in 2010, LGBTQ members are allowed to serve openly in the military. So, see, that's because obviously that the military was still not doing the right thing, and when they couldn't discriminate against black people, they started taking it out on the LGBTQ members in society. So they had to put a stop there. So you have to always keep your eyes on the population, because if you want them to fit inside the frame of the Constitution, you've got to put borders in there to keep them in line. Okay. Now some people might say, "Oh, that's fascism." No, it ain't fascism. Okay, because it ain't the government telling people you can't screw in bed, you can't just date this kind of people, or that, or these people can't stay in this country. Fascism is a lot like micromanaging every aspect of your life. Okay, in this country, we're supposed to give people certain freedoms to be able to do things where they're not being watched or told what they can or can't believe in, or told what they can or can't do. Okay, and the minute you start pulling up one religion, for example, over other religions, that's the beginning of fascism right there. Okay, and right now you got a lot of people in the Trumplican Party who want to hail up as Christianity as the be-all and end-all of being an American. And once you start down that road, brother, it's very hard to undo that, because I'll tell you, many countries fought wars, religious wars, and we've got a torrent of blood in history going as far back as even before Jesus' time, of wars fought in this country over religions, okay? And, you know, we should have learned from all that time that, you know, religion has to be put aside for everybody. When you have a government, people have got to have the right to exercise their personal religion and not have to worry about some other jackass trying to interject his religion or his beliefs into yours, okay? People should be free to believe what they want. Even if it sounds ridiculous, believe what they want and leave other people alone and let them believe what they want, okay? It's how the only way you can at least stop religious feuds from starting, okay? And try to make people understand that even if they don't agree with you 100%, they could still agree to be a friend, to help you when you need help, okay? You can still like people just because they don't agree with the same things you do. I mean, it was time that, you know, there was a time when even people of different political parties could, you know, get together and, you know, laugh and you know, but today it's harder to do because we've allowed, you know, emotion and the misunderstanding of what this country is about to spiral this country out of control, okay? And we desperately need to be re-educated into what America is supposed to be about. And I think, you know, Biden was doing the right thing by trying to talk about democracy, but I think he also needs to talk about America at large and what America is supposed to look like, you know, in this day and age, and what the founding members of our government were trying to explain to us, or trying to lay out for us as to how America ought to be, okay? Because I think that is the source of a lot of tension, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of fighting when it comes into politics, because you've got people on one side who think fascism is the way to go, and you got people on the other side trying to cling to what they believe the Constitution means, and you know what I'm saying, and helping society. You know, you got these two opposing opposites, a positive and a negative, okay, in this country, and it shouldn't be split like that. There should be a mutual understanding on both sides on what things, the basics of what the Constitution is. If they can't agree on the basics, how can they possibly work together as a nation? Okay, that's the problem. All right, so I hope I did the best I could here to discuss this. So anyway, please subscribe and comment on the videos here. I'd like to hear from you. And keep your ears and eyes open to COVID-19 updates in your area. And monkeypox. I haven't heard much about the monkeypox on the news. I'm not saying it ain't out there still, but there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about it. But I'd still try to, you know, at least try to see if there's anything there about it. And treat each other well, okay? I mean, this whole point of this discussion today here was to try to illustrate the necessity of people treating each other like human beings and adults, which we want our children to be when they grow up, to be productive members of society. And that can only happen when people stop looking at each other through eyes of hatred and start looking at them through, you know, fellow comrades and basically working together to build a great nation. We all need each other's help in order to do that. And if we fight with each other, it's never going to get done. And the country's just going to keep falling apart. So we need to undo what we're doing and go back to working together, okay, in order to save, you know, or to fix the country. It's old, you know. There's a lot of things still around that you know, need a lot of fixing here. So let's get focused on that. All right. So I will talk to you again later. Take care, everybody. Bye.